G'day guys, welcome back to True Eagle. Today we're going to take stock of all the little draft rumours we're hearing about the West Coast Eagles ahead of Wednesday's national draft. So a couple things, I'm going to be live on the True Footy YouTube channel on both days of the draft starting, what time is it? I think it's about 7 p.m. Melbourne time. So my focus will probably primarily go to True Footy during that period, but of course I will be back on this channel to wrap up everything the moment I can. But for now, we're going to discuss specifically West Coast and a few of the links we've seen. So primarily I'm going to reference Cal Toomey because his last Phantom Form Guide had some links to different players in different positions, what place are they likely to go in the draft, and I think we're across most of them. There's probably one player who has been linked to us in some sort of way who I haven't really discussed in any meaningful way on this channel. So we're going to go through what Toomey said. There's a couple of articles on the West Australian as well. We can talk a little bit about Malachi Champion. And there's a bit to get into, so let's go through it, starting with Toomey's Phantom Form Guide. All right, here we are. Cal Toomey releases a Phantom Form Guide where he ranks all the prospects about once a month into the lead up of the draft. I'm hoping he releases his mock draft sooner. It could be out Monday. I'm recording this Sunday night here in the UK. And hopefully we'll get a bit of an inkling because Toomey's thing is that he's pretty well connected and he tends to hear things, and therefore his mock draft is pretty accurate. I have a feeling that his mock draft this year might not be very accurate purely because this is so open-ended. The way this draft is going to play out, I think there's so many different things that could happen. But let's just start with the players that are linked to us. I've started on Josh Smiley. In this section here, he says, where does he go? We are not mentioned. So I think that's just mildly interesting. I'd never really considered we were a realistic contender for Josh Smiley. But according to this, Smiley is certainly going to be taken before our selection here. So we scroll down. Harry Armstrong, again, we are not mentioned. I should hope not. The last thing we need is to take a really highly rated key forward. As good as Harry Armstrong is as a prospect, I just don't think it's right for us. So we'll keep scrolling down here. Now, Bo Allen is a player that he ranked at 11. So it's important to clarify, if you haven't seen Toomey's form guides before, they're just ranked in the order in which he ranks them. And so Sam Lawler, who is likely to go pick 1, I think he's put at 5 in this particular edition. So Bo Allen at 11 doesn't really indicate necessarily where he's going to go in the draft. However, it says where does he go? With more interest coming from Richmond, Port Adelaide, West Coast and Melbourne, Allen looks right in demand midway through the first round. St Kilda could also consider him with 2 top 10 picks. The Eagles did not move down the draft order with him specifically in mind. I should kind of hope not, because I think even at the time we knew Bo probably wasn't going to be available. So if that was our plan, it wasn't a very good one. However, this is like the first player we're sort of linked to in this mock draft. So obviously we're still kind of hoping we have the choice of Bo Allen. For me personally, I'm not sure he's the perfect fit for us. But like I said, when you consider all the other major contenders who are likely to be realistic for our selection, there's some sort of caveat on all of them. But I think Bo's more likely to become a really good defender. And even if he becomes a midfielder, stylistically, I think we need someone who can win a little bit more of the footy rather than this explosive type, which is, there's nothing wrong with that type of player. But I just think for what we've already got, Harley Reid, Elijah Hewitt, I'm not sure Bo Allen is the guy I'm hoping slides down, but we'll keep moving through. It just seems that I don't think it's beyond the realm of possibility we'll get Bo Allen. However, when you've got Richmond linked to him and Melbourne, Richmond have 4 picks before us, Melbourne have 2 and then they're out of the draft. So I think this one seems unlikely, but I suppose it's still possible. Here we go for Toby Travali. This is another one that obviously we've talked a fair bit about on this channel. I know he's a favourite amongst a lot of Eagles fans. So where does he go? Travali is in the sights of just about every club between 8 and 15. He's in consideration for St Kilda and Melbourne. He's been closely tracked by Richmond and has West Coast, Fremantle and the Giants also keen. One of those looks set to land the rock solid prospect. Agreed. Again, just my personal taste. I'm not sure if Travali is the guy I'm hoping for, to be honest, to slide down. Out of the 3 that I've discussed most heavily on this channel, purely, again, because there's just a little bit of doubt around him becoming a midfielder, and we could use a very good defender, and I'm not going to complain too much if we get him, and at this point it seems less likely than likely he's going to get through to us when you've got Richmond with so many picks. St Kilda and Melbourne would also have to take him with one of their picks to get him at all, because they don't hold any other picks that are appropriate past that. So thankfully we have picks before Fremantle and GWS, which means there is a chance he gets through to us, but I think Richmond probably seems the most likely. So now we're up to Joe Berry. Joe Berry is a small forward who we've talked a little bit about on this channel. Berry is invited to the first round of the draft. So what that means is, like, on the night of the actual draft, the AFL wants the top 10 prospects to usually get on stage with their jumper presentations. But that's hard to do when you don't know who is going to be taken to the top 10 of this draft. So what they do is they consult the clubs and ask for, a range of names that are a possibility. So the fact that Joe Berry has been given an invite implies that at least one club said there's a chance we take him inside the top 10. And they usually expand it out a little bit. It won't just be 10 invitees. It might invite 15 to 20. I'm not sure exactly what that number is. So long story short, there is some sort of possibility that he doesn't get to our pick. However, following the mock drafts and stuff like that, that does seem pretty left field if Joe Berry goes before our pick. So I do expect at this current point in time, we have a realistic hope of getting him. Although I've just read here, it says, so has plenty of clubs keen in the first 20 selections. Does that mean that players expected to go in the top 20 are now invited to the draft? I probably should have read that before saying it out loud. That's not the way it's been in the past. Either way, I still think we're likely to have access to him at the very least. GWS has done its work and has 3 picks inside the first 21, while West Coast number 12 and Fremantle number 14 and Richmond 10 and 11 have also done their work on him. Okay, so we've come full circle. Richmond at 10 and 11 have put some time into Joe Berry. You'd think at this point they're unlikely to get him with one of their other picks, but I suppose that is still possible. There is another article linking us to Joe Berry, which I'll touch on in a moment. But I do think there is every chance Joe Berry does become a West Coast Eagle, in my personal opinion. I think, like I said, there's so many different variables of how this plays out, and ideally I want a midfielder, but I don't know if the midfielders around that selection are going to be available for us, the way things play out. So Joe Berry is a quick, small forward, high half forward, suits us to some extent. It's not a pressing need, but he would add something different, and he's from Vic Country, which I do suspect will be part of our decision making. So we'll put a pin in Joe Berry for now. There's another article talking about him. Now we've got Taj Houghton, the Vic Metro prospect, who is a bit of a gun. I think he has a lot of potential. Did his ACL earlier in this year, right where he was just starting to get going, which is really frustrating, and therefore there is a degree of risk that comes with taking a guy in the first round, even if I do think he's talented. It says, one of the mysteries of the draft, given his injury layoff, Houghton was on track to be a potential top 10 pick before the ACL, but won't be in that bracket now. West Coast will consider, as will Richmond with its later first-round selections. While the Western Bulldogs have also done their work, the Giants with 3 first-round picks could well be an option. So, yeah, okay, so there's a link here to Taj Houghton. It's quite vague, the way he's phrased it. West Coast will consider. So, in other examples, you might say that West Coast has done their work on him, which implies that, they've probably done some extra interviews or something like that. So that's a little bit vague, but from a talent point of view, Taj Houghton would be a pretty good pick. I'm not super concerned about the ACL. There has been a little bit of an innuendo around him being a flight risk, but that hasn't come from creditable sources at this current point in time, unlike someone like a Murphy Reid, who I will touch on in a little bit later. So now we've got Xavier Lindsay. Where does he go? Clubs such as St Kilda, Fremantle, West Coast, and the Western Bulldogs are all expected to look at Lindsay with first-round selections. So in a lot of the mock drafts I've done lately, I've had Lindsay going a little bit earlier to St Kilda specifically. So they are a big threat here. Xavier Lindsay is the one I'm hoping for, to be honest. I think he suits us the best out of the guys like Bo Allen or Toby Travalia, because he's already a midfielder. And I think the running capacity, the two-way nature of the way he plays, his defensive game, his ball use, I'm a big fan of this guy. He was the Morris medalist as the best player in the Coates Talent League this year. And honestly, this is just my opinion, and I'm not a draft expert. I'm just a very engaged fan, but I'm a little surprised he's not ranked higher. I think for the performance he put in this season, I don't think there's too much of a cap on what he can produce. It seems like the well-performed junior in Xavier Lindsay might be overshadowed a little bit by superior athletes, but that's not my read on it. I think this guy is the one I'm hoping for to last to our selection, and it seems like it's pretty possible at this point. So St Kilda is the one team in there who have a pick higher than us. We are ahead of Fremantle and the Western Bulldogs in the draft order, provided we don't trade down again. But St Kilda have 7 and 8. So does this mean that St Kilda's lining him up for pick 8? Or is there a possibility they're thinking about a trade back with, say, like GWS or something like that and get 15 and 16? And therefore, Xavier Lindsay is realistic to them in that scenario. That might be why they've done their work on him, which is kind of implied here. Best case scenario for me, we have access to Xavier Lindsay and we take him. In the last few mocks I've done, I've had Travalia, Allen, and Lindsay off the board by our first pick. I haven't done this consciously. I just really thought none of them would be available at this current point in time. Xavier Lindsay might be the best bet we have of one of that trio sliding down. Now we're up to the player that we haven't really discussed on this channel because I never really thought it would be a suitable pick for us, but this is interesting here. So we're talking about Jobe Shanahan. He's a 195 centimeter tall forward who can play down back as well. And I've actually got a whole video profile of him coming out today on the True Footy YouTube channel. Could keep an eye out for that. But I think he's a gun. He's gone to the VFL for Essendon and kicked 11 goals in 3 games as a tall forward, and has that real strong overhead intercepting game. The problem is he's a key forward, so I never really considered him as likely for us. However, let's get to what this says. Where does he go? Richmond, Port Adelaide, GWS, and West Coast and Sydney are all viewed as the most favoured clubs to snaffle Shanahan. Of course, other clubs are trying to use future first-round picks to buy back into the early stages of the draft, and they could also eye him should they get a few more picks. Yeah, so I think Essendon might be one team that has been rumoured to be interested. There is a natural link there. But this is interesting. The only way I can justify this is if we're looking at Jobe as a potential key back, which he can play that role. He's also from Vic Country, so he fits the bill there. Now, it's not my first preference. Like, I'd probably be disappointed on the night if we let Xavier Lindsay go and we pick Shanahan as a key forward. But if he becomes an absolute star key back, that probably is something we need. So I'm just putting it out there. That is a link to a player that I have not covered at all on this channel or any channel that I have. Let me know in the comments what you think. I think I'd be a little bit flat, but I'm torn because I do think he's an absolute gun. And I certainly hope we wouldn't be drafting him as a key forward. Is it weird to draft a guy who is primarily a key forward in the first round? Get him to move into state and say, now you're a defender. Is there a downside to that? I'm not too sure. But I do think he's very talented. It's just interesting that we've been linked to him here. Let's talk about Murphy Reid. I realised I accidentally scrolled past him when we first started, but we'll talk about him because he is an option for us. I've talked about Murphy Reid a bit. He's not my preference, and I have a suspicion that West Coast won't pick him. So let's read the comment first. Where does he go? St Kilda and Melbourne will look at him later in the top 10, while Richmond 10 and 11, West Coast, Port Adelaide and Fremantle have shown interest in Reid. There's a chance he is available deeper in the teens as far as the Western Bulldogs pick 17. It's also come off the back of several mock drafts I've seen where we've been allocated Murphy Reid at our first pick. I could be wrong, but this whole flight risk homesick thing didn't just come from nowhere. That was actually reported on The Age now. I've read that in several places. So, look, I'll just say that I'll defer to West Coast judgment here. If they really are thinking that Murphy Reid would be fine, then I will defer to their judgment and I won't comment on it again because they are the ones doing the actual investigation, interviewing of him as a prospect. This is why I haven't really emotionally committed to Murphy Reid to West Coast at all. And I will publicly say I'll be very surprised if we take him. That's just my instinct. On talent, yeah, he's all right. He's good. I think there are some doubts around being, a relatively slow and small prospect. Will he be a full-time midfielder? Will he just be a very good high forward? On talent, there's a caveat against every other prospect that we talked about so far. So it wouldn't be the worst. And if West Coast select him, I will concede that there probably wasn't a meaningful concern there where he probably wasn't telling clubs not to pick him. It is interesting that we've shown interest in Reid. I wonder how much of this is tactical by West Coast. Do you think that's possible? If they're deliberately putting information out there that say, we're interested in Jobe Shanahan and we're interested in Murphy Reid, are we perhaps trying to spook one of the clubs ahead of us to take him before our selection, thus pushing down someone like a Xavier Lindsay, someone we're actually willing to draft? Just a theory. But I don't think Murphy Reid will be at West Coast. I got to shout out my boy Ollie Hannaford here. I've taken him for West Coast in the last two mock drafts. Look, in both of those scenarios, Lindsay, Travalia, Bo Allen, and Taj Houghton, I think, were all gone in those scenarios. So that is my justification for taking Hannaford, who is my preference to say someone like a Joe Barry, in my personal opinion. I just think it's a little bit more upside there, a little bit more X factor. However, I'll just say here, we're not actually linked to him here. However, I am certain I read recently, and I just can't remember what the source was, that said West Coast have done their work on Ollie Hannaford. Maybe that's just West Coast doing its due diligence. I do think we will tend to look at Vic Country in particular because of the perceived lower flight risk sort of thing. So there's Shanahan, Berry, Hannaford, other players we've been linked to there. It makes sense that we would do our work on him, but it doesn't necessarily mean he's a likely pick for our pick 15. I'll be very surprised if he is taken by West Coast at pick 15 at this current point in time. So in those mock drafts, I simply selected who I think they should take, and that is just my own subjective opinion. All right, now we move to Big Footy, because somebody has kindly provided this article here in the West. This is an extract about us eyeing Joe Berry. The West Australian has a paywall, and Stinker here has been an absolute gentleman and jailbreaked for us. Sources have told the Western Australian that Berry is among the contenders for the Eagles' first pick, currently 12, after having several interviews with the club in the lead up to the draft. Okay, so it sounds like we're doing some extra interviews. Now, does this mean he's our number one target? No, but it just might mean that he's in the list of genuine contenders, and perhaps we're anticipating one of the other boys not being available. So we've done our due diligence there, and it just suggests we've got some genuine interest here. They correctly point out West Coast have no shortage of small forwards after recruiting Matt Owies, as well as having Noah Long, Tyler Brockman, Liam Ryan, Jack Petrocelli, and Cripps on their list. I think that is an astute point. They did leave out Tyrell Dewar. Cripps is probably only going to be here for a year. Petrocelli might be gone by the end of next. Who knows? Liam Ryan is 29 next year. He should still have a bit of footy left. And Brockman, I'm not sure he plays too much footy for us again. I know that that's probably a little bit harsh, but I think he's only contracted for one more, maybe two. I could be wrong there. My instincts on him, my expectations are fairly low. But generally speaking, it's not really a position of need. However, Berry does get up the ground a lot more than some of these other types and has the ability to play off halfback and a wing. So he's not a pure small forward. In fact, he's more versatile than Hannaford. I just like Hannaford's talent a bit more. But there we have it. A second source saying that Berry is genuinely being considered by the West Coast Eagles. Now we move to Facebook, where similarly, the West Australians articles are made available to us. It says West Coast are hoping defender Luke Traynor slips to their second pick on Thursday. Interesting. We probably should have always expected that, in the sense that he's probably too good to last that long. But if he slides that long, we've at least got an interest here that is being reported by Mitch Woodcock. West Australian understands the Eagles have strong interest in the under-18 All-Australian fullback Luke Traynor in the second round of this year's draft. So yeah, we've discussed Traynor a little bit here. A third tall defender, probably not going to be your true key back. We probably still need to draft another key back if we get Luke Traynor. But very good player in my opinion, and he's slid down the rankings a little bit, possibly partially because that lack of key position ability. He's more of a third tall defender, but I think this guy projects, as a much better version of Josh Rotham. I thought Rotham, when he started, I really thought he had a big future at AFL level. So we don't want to get scared, but just by the fact that I've made that connection. But I do think Traynor has a lot of upside, a lot of potential in his ball use and intercepting game. Is something we could use, definitely. Another article here from Mitch Woodcock on the 17th of November. West Coast have committed to drafting NGA prospect Malachi Champion. I'm going to do another video soon on the back of this, discussing Malachi. The nephew of former Adelaide and Carlton superstar Eddie Betts has previously trained at the Eagles as part of their academy. Under the current rules, West Coast can now match bids on any of their academy products no matter when they come up. So it just matters about how many points we have. So scroll down here. This is the points we have currently, which is interesting. They've added a few extras because that's how many list spots we have: 72, 77, 87, and 92. So I believe 72 holds points. Everything after that does not. However, as the actual draft gets underway and bids are matched and other clubs' picks are absorbed, everyone's picks do move up and clubs will start, potentially passing as well. I don't know if that actually moves everyone up. I presume so. Either way, those picks will come in and therefore hold more value. And I read somewhere, someone on Big Footy did the work, and I think he suggested that after about 45, 46, if a bid comes after then we already have enough points. And finally, just a bit on Michael Selwood, no relation to the other former great West Coast players in Adam and Scott. We might have to nickname this bloke Bunnings if we do recruit him. But Michael Selwood looms as a potential trainer and prospect for West Coast, and I think it says Carlton a little bit later here. So Selwood is 21. He is a medium-sized defender. He's got 19.3 disposals a game this year in a premiership winning season for Pure Thunder. I'm not going to lie, I don't know a whole heap about him. I don't actually watch a lot of the waffle competition. I just simply do not have the time. But I'm aware of him. I didn't realize he was so young. And it looks like we are showing interest in him, as are Carlton, who hopefully keep their little grubby mitts off him. However, he has not nominated for next week's national draft, meaning he would be recruited via the supplemental selection period. So this would be through a train-on process and would be one reason for us not taking all 6 selections in this coming draft. I was kind of hoping he was a key back. He is not. At 186 centimeters, we're talking about a 21-year-old medium-sized defender, and he's put up pretty solid numbers. I think it was his debut this year in the Waffle League competition. So another 21-year-old medium-sized defender. We do have a little bit of a vacuum there now with Witherden and Rotham being delisted. Probably lacking a little bit of depth. Bergiel also moved forward and also got delisted. He might be re-signed as a train-on. So I think there's a clear need from him. I like that he's 21. Don't have any other stronger opinions than that. And finally, another article here saying the West Coast Eagles show interest in South Fremantle defender Tom Bell, while Collingwood eye Clancy Dennis. I cannot see this article, and I have not been able to find a different version of it. However, Tom Bell is a key defender from South Fremantle, and I've heard good things. I haven't really tracked him that closely as a draft prospect, and he's likely to get taken, past 30. So I presume this is more of a trade-in type scenario. So maybe he's like in the 40s or 50s, I'm not sure. However, that is another player we've been meaningfully linked to. So there you have it, guys. That is just a rundown of all the players that I can find us linked to. If you can find any more, let us know in the comments. I don't think you can post links in the comments. I think YouTube filters it out, but if you can name where you saw it, I'll do a little bit of digging, and it's all interesting stuff this time of year. As I said, we'll be covering it all on the True Footy YouTube channel. I hope to have a Malachi Champion video for you over the next couple of days. For now, let me know in the comments what you think about the players discussed in this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.